Hello, welcome to the Digimed TV channel, inaugural launch. My name is David Wortley and I've set up Digimed TV as a potential platform to share the best in digital medicine knowledge and education. I've got this inaugural program. We have a great program lined up for you. So without further ado, I'm going to play a little sting that shows you what you can expect this morning. Well, I hope that gives you a little bit of an appetite for staying with us today. I'm going to be also sharing my thoughts and ideas about the future of digital medicine, and I'm going to be including a virtual visit to the Digimed International General Hospital. So to begin with, what is this channel all about? The channel is designed to provide information about digital medicine and to bring in interviews with guests who are leading experts in the field. As you saw from the sting, we have some great guests lined up today. We've got Shane Fitch starting at around about 8 o'clock, followed by Arjun Panisar, who's CEO and founder of DDM. He's followed by Valentino Megale, and then Steve Dan, and finally Lucia Panese. All of these individuals have great experience in digital medicine, and they're going to share their expertise on this channel. I'd like to begin now by just sharing a few slides from a presentation that I did recently at an international conference about the future of digital medicine and therapeutics. So here we go. So the presentation is about digital medicine and therapeutics. Just a bit of background. I'm Vice President of the International Society of Digital Medicine, which was founded in 2015 at the inaugural international conference in Nanjing. The image that you see there was taken almost 2 years ago, about 18 months ago, at their launch of the Digimed International General Hospital, which I will be taking you on a virtual visit in a little while. So looking at the causes of death, top causes of death, we can see that today the main causes of death are non-communicable diseases. And this is a significant difference to what we've had in the early part of the 20th century, when in 1900, the top causes of death included pneumonia, tuberculosis, diarrhea, heart disease. Today, we are in a different situation. The primary causes of death are non-communicable diseases. And to exacerbate this situation, we are now in a stage where we have, through developments in medical techniques and practices, we've been able to extend the longevity of human beings quite substantially. But in extending longevity, we've created a situation where, as people get older, they do get more medical problems, and consequently the annual cost per head once you get to the age of 60 starts to rise substantially, and in the USA it rises almost exponentially. And combined with this is the phenomenon known as the aging society. which means that there's an increasingly smaller number of people working, able to support through their contributions to public health services the aging population. So this is quite a serious combination which requires some thought and some intervention. So when we're talking about non-communicable diseases, we're looking at things like obesity and diabetes and the number of conditions which are linked to obesity. And these include things like arthritis, cancer, infertility, heart disease, back pain, diabetes, as I mentioned, and stroke. But the world we live in makes it increasingly difficult to manage this situation. We also have another phenomena, which is to do with the fact that many of the medical conditions are treated by drugs that we have become dependent on. And as you get older, you increasingly find that this is not just a single drug, it's basically a cocktail of drugs. And this cocktail of drugs can lead often to comorbidity and additional medical problems. And this is a situation that we have in my own household at the moment with a 96-year-old who has to take quite a number of individual drugs, which all interact with each other, or some of them interact with each other, potentially causing problems. So are we able to provide alternatives to drugs and vaccines? Now, obviously, drugs and vaccines are a very important part of maintaining health. But are there any alternatives? And this is where I believe that digital medicine has a significant role to play. And if we look at how medicine has developed over the years, before we came to the era of digital technologies, doctors and patients treatment was very much based on a doctor-patient relationship. And this doctor-patient relationship was enhanced by the doctor's use of the tools and the technology at his disposal. So you can see the medicine bag on the left-hand side there. And this has continued today, and increasingly as we develop new technologies, we've combined this human intelligence in the doctor and the patient to harness the technologies available at the time. Here you see a doctor showing an X-ray to patients, explaining what the medical condition is. And it's this doctor-patient relationship, harnessing technology, which has formed the backbone of medical profession. So for most of human history, our health and well-being, it's been managed by this combination of human intelligence in both the doctor and the patient. And this intelligence has been supported by the technologies that allow the doctor to provide diagnosis. But one of the issues with this approach is that national health services, wherever you are in the world, have tend to focus on sickness rather than health and well-being. So they focused on cure rather than prevention. So when we look at the role of artificial intelligence, for example, we can see how things have evolved. In the past, medical technologies such as X-rays and stethoscopes, thermometers, all of these were essentially dumb technologies. They tended to be proprietary and unconnected. And health services in the past have really been sickness services. And in order to support these, clinicians required a certain substantial amount of skill and training in order for them to be able to interpret vital signs, data. And patients, because they didn't have the access to knowledge and information themselves, were very much dependent on medical professionals. And likewise, health insurance is been based, what your insurance is based on the statistics of how likely you are to get ill, how likely you are to die, and at what age you're likely to die. So for the purposes of this presentation, I want people to imagine themselves, or imagine that human health is analogous to car health. And we can look at the way in which technology is involved within cars and see whether there are any parallels to be drawn with the evolution of technology in human health. So when we look at technology, we all know in our life we have a journey which takes us from a starting point, which we know, which is when we're born, to an ending point. So if we think of life as a journey, although we know the starting point and the ending point, and we know some of the likely places we are likely to visit en route, getting married, being ill and getting old, and finally going to the grave, we don't really know what that journey is going to be like, how long it's going to last, and whether our life's journey is going to be easy or difficult. But the vehicle that takes us on this journey through our life is our body. So our body is a journey vehicle. It takes us to our final destination, and its condition determines where we are on that journey, the nature of the journey, how long it will last. And the problem is that most of us don't really know enough, or are able to, or even sometimes willing to monitor the body condition and properly maintain it. So if we look at the way that cars evolved throughout history, in the 1950s, you can see a picture of this Humber Snipe and the garage mechanic. We relied on human skills to get the best from our vehicles. Vehicles were not as easy to drive in those days as they are today. And we also relied on knowledge professionals like the garage mechanics to be able to fix problems when they arose. So the consequences of this lack of technology in older cars is more breakdowns and a complete reliance on garages and mechanics to diagnose problems, maintain our vehicles, and also repair them. But modern cars are different. They do have technology which measures a great deal of things, some of which we've been able to measure for quite a long time, but they measure oil pressure, temperature, speed, range with a petrol tank. And today, these vehicles warn us of these technologies, warn of us impending problems. They know where we are with the sat-nav device, and they know how to get to a destination, and can even advise us where to go if we go off track. So it's this combination of human skill and intelligence, which is enabled by digital technologies within motor vehicles. So when we look at the impact of digital technologies and artificial intelligence in the medical profession, what we're seeing is that medical devices are becoming increasingly smarter, they're more connected, and they're increasingly affordable. And with this advent of digital technologies, diagnostics become more precise and reliable. And increasingly, human intelligence is embedded within the devices themselves, so they're able to provide advice and guidance. And a consequence of this is that patients are becoming more aware of their own medical situation, and consequently potentially less reliant on medical professionals. And with this, it's likely, as time moves on, that clinicians are going to need less training, and they're also going to need different skills, because some of the intelligence and diagnostics is going to be built into the technology itself. And now I think we're in a situation where we are shifting our focus towards preventative healthcare. So if we look at how technology has evolved, not just in the medical profession, but also in almost every human activity, digital technologies have become increasingly consumerized. And by this I mean they have changed in nature from being technologies which are proprietary, dumb and unconnected and only used by professionals, to technologies which increasingly with smartphones and with cloud computing and a whole range of other things have become smart, they've become more connected. And they've also been more focused on consumers, in other words, citizens. And so the technologies which used to be solely the domain of a medical professional are now accessible and usable by ordinary individuals. So looking at the technologies that have helped to enable this, we can see in the past we've had the doctor's medical bag with a stethoscope, we've seen the blood pressure monitor device and thermometers used by nurses, and all of these tools have become digitized. And with that digitization, the price of these devices and the accessibility of these devices and the usability of these devices have become more affordable. So we've seen the consumerization of medical technologies. So technology can be very empowering, whether it's a surgeon or whether you're training on a medical simulator. All of these technologies provide reliability, a certain amount of freedom, independence, control, and precision, because they've become more attractive, more affordable, and more accessible. And now we are seeing technologies which are increasingly becoming embedded within human beings, and in some cases, so for example, like an insulin pump, they're actually being used to control things like blood sugar levels. So these embedded devices are increasingly have the potential to control our health, not just provide us with advice, not just provide medical professionals with the data that they need to make diagnoses, but increasingly they are helping to control our health. So when we look at artificial intelligence and digital therapeutics, we have to ask the question of where the future does lie. So now I'm going to stop sharing these slides. I will go back to them in a little while. But I just want to play a little clip to show you some of the things that we are likely to see in today's program. Later on in the program, I'm going to be having an interview with Lucia Panese, who is the CEO and founder of Milan-based Imaginary. And she's going to be talking about one of their flagship products, which is designed to help with patients to rehabilitate from strokes and from conditions like Parkinson's disease. So I'm going to show a little demonstrator of the rehabilitate product. So Lucia Panesi will be joining us around about 8:30. So we'll have a little bit of an interview with her. But I'm also going to be talking about talking to some other people. And one of these, and it's first up around about 8 o'clock, will be Shane Fitch. And she's going to be talking about another chronic condition which can be supported by some digital technologies. And I'm going to play a little trailer for her.
The doctor because I was breathless. I wondered if I had flu or a cold, and sarcastic comment from the doctor. But it wasn't called COPD at first. It was called smoking related asthma, and that was the stigma right from the start. So, you know, I felt even more guilty. And then I learnt about the disease, and the teaching in England is you don't feel guilty, but it's hard. We have a saying in England, don't give up, giving up.
So Shane Fitch is going to be talking about COPD technologies, and that's going to be followed by Arjun Panasar, and he's going to be talking about his company DDM and the digital medicine solutions that they have to tackle diabetes. So here's a little trailer about a solution, which is not a DDM solution, but it's dealing with diabetes.
Mother app allows women to record their blood sugar levels, and then for all the clinicians involved in their care to see their results at any time. Gestational diabetes is one of the most common medical complications of pregnancy. The opportunity arose for us to collaborate with CSIRO using their already developed healthcare platforms. The traditional model was the woman would come to clinic every 2 weeks with her sugars written in a book. The GDM app allows the woman to upload her sugars to the clinician portal where the clinician can see them at any time. The benefits for us are that we can see the woman's sugars so that we can review them regularly rather than when she just comes in to see us. It allows us to see the women that we need to see in a more timely manner, but also, and importantly, not to see the women whose sugars are well controlled as regularly. Feedback from the women who've used the app is that it's been easy to use, and for some of our busy mums who've already got children at home, it's meant they haven't had to come to clinic as frequently, but they still know that their sugars are being reviewed by our clinical team. The Mother app is an example of a successful collaboration between Metro South and CSIRO.
So that's an example of the use of digital medicine to help address, manage the condition of diabetes. But one of the most important, and I think one of the most promising technologies that's going to be available in the near future is the use of virtual reality. And so before I come on to talking to Shane, I'd just like to take you on a little virtual tour of the Digimed International General Hospital, which is an example of how you can use virtual reality to, in this case, to create a virtual tour of a hospital. But you'll see from other videos that I'm going to show later on, virtual reality can be used for a wide variety of different applications, including digital therapeutics. So this is a very short tour of a virtual visit to Digimed International General Hospital. So you can see this video was actually shot during the launch of the hospital, which took place in around about October 2019. It's almost a self-navigating tour, but you can control the tour, and you can choose where you want to go. And you simply rotate round the screen as I'm doing now, and you can go to different departments. So this is an example. This is the MRI scanner. And included in this, you can have some video clips which explains to patients what they're likely to expect when they go to the hospital to have an MRI scan. So just taking you back to one or two different places within the hospital. So this is where the blood testing takes place within the hospital. And so I can navigate backwards and forwards, and this is just an example of the use of VR. What I'm going to be showing this afternoon is actually doing an interview with the founders of a company called VZ Fit, or VR Zoom. I'm going to stop sharing this now, and I'm going to be talking to them about the use of these VR technologies to encourage compliance and physical exercise. Well, now I'm delighted to have Shane Fitch join me. Shane, very nice to see you. I've given you a little plug. I don't know whether you were watching earlier, but I gave you a little plug and showed a little trailer of your COPD video. So, Shane, just tell me a little bit about Levexair Foundation.
Okay, well, we're dedicated to respiratory diseases, and we're branching into COVID, as many people have issues with respiratory condition. It's coming in through, unfortunately, through our air channels, we know, and we're working quite closely on all the variables that we need to monitor diseases. So we have a platform, an ecosystem, where we can engage patients, educate them in better self-care, connect with our healthcare professional network, and help them to monitor how they're doing and get care plans going, particularly important now with everybody so disconnected from their healthcare services.
Yes, you mentioned people being disconnected from the healthcare services. Obviously, the current coronavirus situation has a lot to do with that. So do you see what we call in the UK long COVID? Is that a COPD type condition?
No, it's very variable. Actually, we're just beginning to set up a program called ReCOVID. We've got a lot of people in social media are affected, and we want to make sure that we can analyze better the different variables, the different ways that the disease is manifesting itself in people after hospitalization, or if they've never been hospitalized. So for that, we actually are beginning to connect with an AI company who want to come into the consortium that we set up last year, and participate in a 2020 call, or even look for alternative funding. But what we want to do is personalize very much each patient journey, the digital patient journey, so that the difficulties each person has, we can work with. So we need multidisciplinary action for that. And of course, with digital, this is possible, because we can, I think, in the future, the care models we will have will be very personalized. So healthcare services will be able to assign the necessary resources, the necessary healthcare professionals to the patient according to their own personal profile, disease profile, as it were.
So what do you see the role of how do you see artificial intelligence playing to this? Are there any dangers with the use of artificial intelligence in supporting these types of patients?
Yeah, I think that there's been a lot of buzz around artificial intelligence, but the most important thing is the quality of data that's put in, and the sort of algorithms that the clinicians and the researchers themselves come up with, and the people who are more experienced in AI. So I think you have to work with people who have a lot of experience in AI, so you can get rid of buzz and actually do some relevant work on prediction, on determination, on predisposition. But for predisposition, we're going to have these kind of analytical tools to work with such a diverse data set that we should be bringing in, whether it's genomic data, whether it's history, whether it's clinical batteries that you apply to each individual, their own patient-reported outcomes, which are going to be taken much more seriously now. So about listening to the patient, what they have to say, and gaining confidence with them, and then a new engagement journey with patients, which is based on who they are, not just the immediate clinical data that we've had, and then the way we interact with people about their health. It's very different from one age group to another, as you know, from different disease profiles, whether they're complex or less severe. And all these things, there's no way we can take them into account without beginning to use this kind of level of analytics now.
Yeah, I can understand how AI can be extremely powerful in being able to take into account all the variables that you mentioned there. But when we look at some of the clinical devices that are available today for monitoring our vital signs, I found that my experience is that there's a certain amount of reticence amongst the developers of these devices to get involved in trying to be prescriptive in any way. What would you say about that?
Yeah, I think that there's a huge amount of investment coming into digital health and startups and this, that, and the other. But how many of those are actually coming through the pipeline for validation and for certification is a lot less. And it's taking 10 years. I know some really good technology that's just about getting to certification process, but it's been a 10-year journey, the same as our journey, I would say, from Love Air. Now, what happens is, if we don't get the clinical validation, if we don't get the prescribers using this, how useful is it going to be to have an amazing device, wonderful technology, but the data isn't shared with the clinicians or the researchers? I really think that pathway has its limitations, and I think it's very important for these startups to come together, and that's what we're trying to do at Love Air, is bring in what we see promising IT and respiratory, or for patient management, aggregate it in the ecosystem. So then we're getting different data sets from a device or from specific tech, whether it be voice, sound, whatever, and add it to the monitoring and the other data sets which we will be getting in the background, whether it's image, whether it's genomic, and so on. But we have to start to aggregate these. The huge fragmentation in device market it's inefficient for healthcare services. It's just not viable. So aggregating now, tech of value, data of value, I think that's really what we need to be doing right now.
Yeah, I can see the value of that. But what about the question of data protection and privacy and reluctance of people to share their data if they think it's going to be, a problem?
I see a very mixed approach to that. I mean, if you do look at all the questionnaires, people are very positive about sharing their data when it's relevant and it's with their clinical network. So we have to have secure environments where we have trust with people, first of all, and they know that the data is their asset. That's their intellectual property. And in exchange for that data, what are they going to get in return? They're going to get care pathways in return, or research on the area of their health that needs addressing. This year we are in the decade of lung health, 2030 breathe vision, which has been identified by the EU, for example, and identified by World Health Organization, the digital decade. So we really must begin to get these systems much more operational. And that requires a huge amount of effort, because our healthcare systems, I have to say, are still a long way behind the curve. So working together, even on external platforms, and bringing in this kind of partnering, multi-stakeholder partnering, is essential, because there are new trainings for healthcare professionals, there are new profiles of healthcare professionals, and there are different ways that people are going to manage their health. Trust is the first step. get some confidence about changing the way you do a daily care planning with digital resources. Get the support you need in that process. But I don't think that it's impossible as long as we're in trusted environments. I think the fragmentation leads to some level of, let's say, uncertainty, because where is the data going from a small startup? I mean, is it the investor who's behind it? Who is the investor behind it? How is it going to be shared? What is it going to be improved with? Those considerations, I don't think a lot of the smaller companies have really put together the bigger picture yet, to convince people about what they're doing. But it's important.
So do you think that coronavirus has actually changed people's attitude towards all of these things? I mean, in the UK, for example, we've begun to talk about things like COVID passports, so that you can validate the fact that you've had an injection or you've had a test. And there's this balance between the needs of the individual and the needs of society. So do you think that we should look at some kind of social contract between individuals and their data and society, so that people know that in exchange for sharing this data anonymously, hopefully, that they will be able to get the access to better treatment?
Yeah, I do. I actually think we are in a big moment of change, social injustices on all levels, non-discrimination. I think for health, that's the most important thing right now, because people are, there are millions of people who are unemployed, and we really don't know how this is going to play out, in spite of markets being super positive, in spite of money going into specific areas of the economy. I think that there has to be a return on investment on people's participation in their own health and well-being, because even in we're seeing in the labor market in big companies, the chief medical officers are being a key part of the high-level executive management. Why is that? It's because if we don't have healthy people, how are we going to be productive in society? So I think that this change is very much needed anyway, and now we need to embrace it.
Okay, thank you very much, Shane. I can see that Arjun's joined us. It sounds as if he's got a wrecking ball in his apartment.
He's skating. Has he got a skateboard? A skateboard.
Yeah, have you got a skateboard there, Arjun?
It's my daughter's. I'd like to say I was skating in the morning, but no, my daughter's.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for joining me this morning, and thank you, Shane, for joining me as well.
Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah. Thank you. Bye bye. So, Arjun, can you just begin by just telling me a little bit about yourself and DDM?
Sure. Well, my name is Arjun Panasar. I am the founding CEO of a company called Diabetes Digital Media, or DDM. And we founded when my grandfather was diagnosed with type 2 diabetes after a quadruple heart bypass way back in 2002. It was actually a little bit later that year. He asked me what he should eat as he was diagnosed with type 2 diabetes. He said I said I wasn't quite sure what he should eat, and he certainly wasn't sure. So I said, why don't we ask the internet? And we started what is now the world's largest diabetes community, and from that community have been able to create digital health interventions that are used around the world.
So this is a real UK success story. Can you just tell me the sort of technologies that are involved in helping people to manage and treat diabetes?
Sure. It's fair to say that the digital health ecosystem has certainly widened, particularly over the last 18, 24 months. So we really start at point of diagnosis. So if someone was to be diagnosed with type 2 diabetes or pre-diabetes, they would be given access to our app. Once they enrolled on the app, we'd support them with behavior changes, such as improving the nutrition within their diet. So for instance, reducing the amount of added sugar and increasing the amount of real foods and reducing the amount of processed foods. We then sort of really support that within the ecosystem. So we have have behavior change techniques and resources such as recipe libraries and sort of, well, features that are tailored to you. And that's really where the benefit of digital health comes in. So the moment that you step into the platform, based on your culture, your language, your preferred foods, your dietary preferences, everything you then see is completely personalized or tailored around you, given the data that you've contributed. And what that allows us to do is really hyper personalize that treatment pathway for that particular user. And we can obviously do this at scale. And then what we're able to achieve is something quite significant. So with the platform, 1 in 4 patients places their type 2 diabetes into remission within the first 12 months. And around about 90% of them continued that remission into the second year. So it's quite significant in regards to what behavior change platforms or ecosystems such as ours can contribute to.
I talked earlier on, I'm not sure whether you were there, but I was talking earlier on about the problems of non-communicable diseases and the role that obesity plays in all of this. What you've just described is pretty much the management of the diabetes condition. What about preventative health care?
It's all really on a spectrum. So, you know, we started in diabetes with people with type 2 diabetes rather, and sort of, you know, slowly but surely you can sort of work out from that population. So people with type 2 diabetes quite often have other health conditions, hypertension, high cholesterol. People with obesity is another area that we're working in. We work with a number of local hospitals where we provide our interventions. But the interesting thing is our interventions were really designed as to sit on top of or to augment the treatment pathway. Whereas what we're finding, particularly in the obesity services, is that we need something far more blended and far more integrated with the local care. However, having said that, you're absolutely right. With prevention, there's a huge opportunity, which we actively do work in. I suppose the only difference would be the scale. So people obviously understand things like type 2 diabetes, and there's about 1.6 billion people across the world that have a metabolic health disorder. Whereas prevention seems to be less on the radar because it seems to be a lot easier to cure something than prevent it, or at least monetarily, that seems to be where the money is going.
Yeah, I guess that's true. I mean, I'm not diabetic, but I was pre-diabetic, and so several years ago I started on a regime to try and help to improve my condition. So, and this was just very simplistically a mixture of daily walking, the 10,000 steps phenomena, and diet. And I found that I was able to make a significant difference in my weight. I lost 21 kilos in 3 months. And what I discovered was that it's diet really that is far more important. Well, exercise is important, but diet seems to be where you need to focus your attention on it. Would that be your experience?
Absolutely. So we've got about 1.8 million members across our services, and it's fair to say that you can't outrun a bad diet. So it doesn't really matter how much exercise and activity that you do. If you're eating sort of a very sort of poorly made up diet, which doesn't have many nutrients and sort of, you know, it's got a lot of processed foods, you're really going to struggle to lose weight. So, you know, testament to your achievements. I'm sure, you know, what you did do were sort of simple behavior changes that a lot of people can really do, you know, probably on their own. And then there's a group of people who, you know, who prefer support or require support, particularly for motivation and encouragement. And quite often you can go further than you think, particularly with the right support around you.
Yeah, I think you're right, absolutely right, and which is where I mean, one of the organisations I got involved with for a short while was Weight Watchers. And going to their weekly meetings and being with people in a similar kind of situation did help in trying to address the situation. So, do you think that digital technologies can help with creation of some kind of digital ecosystem where you develop partnerships of this nature?
I think that's exactly where it's going. So over the last, probably since November time, it seems as though the market has been red hot. So the kinds of conversations that we're involved in is really about how we can create this end-to-end digital ecosystem. It's still certainly, some long way off, but, really creating an internet hospital that, an internet primary and secondary care that is able to triage, predict, diagnose. We've probably got a little bit of time left before our houses know our temperature, but sort of as we move into the 2030s, 2040s, that kind of pervasive, ubiquitous access to data is, driven through things like 5G is what really will help us achieve the digital ecosystem of the future.
Yeah, I can see that. I can see how smart homes are evolving and all of these technologies are linked. Do you think there's a danger that we become over-reliant on these technologies rather than using our own, if you like, motivation and judgment?
It's certainly a scary prospect. Depending on who you speak to, arguably AI is a race that is doing particularly well, and the humans are becoming more and more subservient to it. There are a number of unintended consequences. So, for instance, how they have those menus in McDonald's, the sort of the screened menus, and I remember reading an article to say that over 9 in 10 of them had a bacteria on that you would typically find in and around the toilet. So the consequences of our actions will only really stand to understand in the next 15, 20 years. But I would probably say that you can have too great a reliance on technology, and what things like social media have taught us is that it is not necessarily for the benefit of your own health. So social media and sort of obviously excessive consumption can lead to things like depression and anxiety and sort of feelings of lack of self-worth. And I suppose flipping that into medicine, the moment that you Google any symptom, it quite often diagnoses you or says that you could be diagnosed something beginning with C. So I think there is certainly some caution to be played out here. But as the ecosystem matures, and as you have access to your data and sort of more professionalized, I suppose, pathways for digital health access, then hopefully that will become less of a concern, and more the concern will be where is my data and what is happening with my data.
Yeah, I can see that. And finally, just to ask you about the impact of coronavirus on your work. It seems to me, anecdotally, and occasional articles in the paper, that people are suffering from mental health issues as a result of coronavirus, and one of the byproducts of that is overeating or comfort eating. Has that been your sort of experience?
Absolutely. So we can see from patients with long COVID, or patients who have self-declared diagnosis with long COVID, that there is a period of overeating. We are also seeing long-term symptoms. So things like anxiety, breathlessness, which you really would package up with long COVID. So our work is currently focused on supporting those that we see through because of COVID, and as we typically work within a metabolic health space. Obviously, things like type 2 diabetes and hypertension are key risk factors for COVID. So optimizing your eating and your mental health is obviously key. We definitely see there being a part in digital health playing a part in the COVID ecosystem. But what it has really done is it sort of launched it about 15 years ahead. And so to some degree, a lot of industries and organizations are really sort of exploring and learning how best they can use their technologies in order to combat a condition which is quite novel and really not quite well understood, particularly sort of post-diagnosis. I know we know a lot about the vaccine, etc., but more sort of long COVID and the implications of that on mental and physical health.
Well, I thank you very much for joining me this morning, Arjun. We have Valentino Megale, who I'm just going to add to the stream now. Hi, Valentino. So he's my next interviewee. He's absolutely spot on time. Thank you for joining me, Arjun. You're more than welcome to stay on and listen to the rest of the program and contribute if you want. But if not, thank you for joining me this morning. Thank you.
Brilliant.
Good morning, Valentino. Where are you speaking to me from?
I'm from Italy right now.
Okay. Well, would you like to begin by introducing yourself and say something about Software Studios?
Yes, absolutely. Thanks. So I'm Valentino Megale. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Software Studios. We are an Italian-based digital health startup specialized in developing virtual reality solutions for the stress management and therapy education of hospitalized patients. So our goal is basically to reduce the stress levels of patients and increase also their adherence to therapy without drugs, without invasive interventions, but using the power of digital technologies and of human perception.
Okay, so what kind of virtual reality environments are involved in these treatments? Can you just give me a few examples?
Yes, so we started in 2017 with pediatrics. So our first target user is the pediatric patients during stressful oncological treatment. So we designed our first project, Tommy, which is a gamified environment for children, allowing children to defy the boundaries inside of the hospital and go beyond the walls where they are forced to stay with their mind instead of our bodies. So in that case, we designed an environment that is built around a deep knowledge of the patient and of the profile of his fragilities, because the patient is not a standard user, so he has a profile of motor, sensory, and cognitive fragilities that we need to take into consideration to provide an environment that has a positive impact on his life without negatively impacting on his therapy experience. In that case, it was also a collaborative environment where children can share gaming activities with their parents. And now we're also developing solutions for adults and elders. So we designed also an MRI simulation for adult patients to help them familiarize, get used with the real test. And we are now also ready to launch a new project for people during blood transfusion, an environment allowing patients to distract during the long blood transfusion, but also to connect with other patients wherever they are in the same hospital or even between different hospitals.
That looks very advanced. I'm intrigued by what you said right at the beginning with the therapies for children, and what you described seemed to me to be extremely personalised and based on the individual child's condition and the profile and the rest of it. Surely that's quite expensive to develop a virtual reality environment that's just tailored to an individual.
It's obviously, it's not tailored to the single individual, to the target user, but it depends really to deep understanding of patient's journey in the hospital. This allows us to identify the most critical moments of this journey. And these moments are the moment where virtual reality can provide and can become meaningful and significant to help patients. So there is no one experience inside of Tommy. This is a library of different activities that statistically are able to support patients through this variety of different conditions and situations. So obviously, there is no one standard user, there is no one standard condition, and it's not possible to realize and provide one solution that fits all. But it's possible to diversify the solution to support the most of these conditions.
Oh, okay. So just perhaps describe to me in a bit more detail about a specific condition, obviously not mentioning the patient's name or anything, but if you give a kind of background of a condition and the kind of VR experience, what would the user see, what would the user have to do, and what would be the outcome of that therapy?
Yes, I'd like to highlight two extreme and different conditions. There are patients that are very anxious and scared about a specific test like blood test. In this case, patients need an active distraction from the medical test, from the medical procedure, but also they are living a specific condition where they can use only one hand instead of the other one. They need not to move too much. So they need to stay relaxed, to stay distracted, but without moving too much, because in that case, they are going to impact the treatment. So in that case, we designed an activity inside of Tommy where children can play only with one hand, and we calibrated the movements of head and of the body in order for children to see everything that matters in front of them, so they can interact with them, they can enjoy the experience, but without impacting and impairing the medical procedure. On the other side, we have children that don't want to interact so much. They are hospitalized, they're on their beds, and they want just to relax without any kind of additional interaction. For them, we designed an inaugural activity where children can experience and enjoy the virtual reality environment only with their sight, changing lights, changing colors, changing animations, and changing sounds, just like a sensory toy, without involving too much movement. This is important to not stress them too much during the very delicate moment of hospitalization.
So just can I just ask you to expand on that just a little bit? What you described, although you mentioned patients only able to use one hand rather than another, are these interactive experiences, or do they tend to be passive experiences?
No, they are definitely interactive. For us, interaction is very important. So children find themselves in a fantasy environment where they are supported by a digital companion, and they need to use their memory, their sensory skills, their motor skills to reach the goals of the game. But it's definitely an interactive one. We don't want to use passive distraction. We want children to be part of their therapy journey. So we need really to promote a proactive approach of patients. So that's why we provide interactive experiences. Also because it's more distractive, okay? Respect the traditional 360 videos and similar.
Okay, so what about conditions like dementia? I had an email over the weekend from someone who works at a centre in nearby Northampton, and her challenges with dementia patients. So they've done a lot of experiments and research using different kinds of immersive VR environments for patients who have got moderate conditions, as a way of probably helping to calm them and relax them. But the question that she put to me in her email was, could you use virtual reality with something like an exercise bike, so that you can encourage them to exercise, so that they can cycle through the countryside, something like that? Is that something that can be created?
Yeah, provide so. In case of dementia and neurodegenerations, I think that virtual reality and XR could be useful, both for providing content to relax and bring patients where they want to be, in order to trigger their memories, trigger their past experiences, trigger their cognitive fitness. It can be possible. There are evidences about that. There are growing researches about that in the world. But I think that virtual reality also provides a very interesting aspect of diagnosis. So virtual reality is not only about providing content, but also in collecting data about the reactions of the users. So if we provide a specific environment to measure specific reactions, we can even be informed about patterns, so behavioral and motor patterns that are specific for a particular condition like dementia, like other neurodegeneration. So just imagine in a future when you provide virtual reality to diagnose a specific conditions as earlier as possible. I think this is a possibility offered by virtual reality, and this is the opportunity of the so-called digital biomarkers. It's all about research in this field. It's very important to validate this pattern, these behavioral and motor patterns that can act like digital biomarkers, but it's a very interesting way to diagnose specific conditions in a delocalized, remote way instead of impacting the work of the health operators in the hospitals.
Well, thank you very much, Valentino. I've noticed Steve Dunn's joined us in the studio now, so I'm going to add him to the stream and welcome him and just say thank you for joining me, Valentino, and I hope to see you at future events. So thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Steve. It's good to see you. How are you this morning?
Very good, David. Good to see you as well. How's it been going?
Yeah. Well, so far so good. I think the interview parts have gone quite well. They're all going to time. So I'm trying to keep to a tight schedule. So I thank you very much for joining me on time. Would you like to just begin by saying a bit about yourself and about medical realities?
Yeah, certainly love to. Well, I'm Steve Dann. My background is tech, originally in film and television, but I've been in augmented reality space and virtual reality space for over 15 years now. And my passion at the moment is a company called Medical Realities. And Medical Realities, I started Medical Realities about 5 years ago with Professor Shafi Ahmed, who's a world-renowned surgeon from Barts here in London. And we actually started Medical Realities really to sort of leverage all the things that we could do with immersive technology. And we saw that medicine was a great space, and the healthcare space was a great space to be in using immersive technology. And as I say, yeah, 5 years has flown past, and things have changed. And I think that we were banging at the door for a long time, but I think the door is now well and truly open.
I think I have to agree with you there, being in the same kind of space as you. What have you seen as the impact of coronavirus on the work that you do? How's that affected you?
Well, it's affected us sort of quite significantly in one way, in that we, in actual fact, do a lot of work which actually takes place in a clinical environment, and of course, for the last year, that's been impossible. So we've expanded our work that we do in sort of medical simulation work. But we're also looking forward to getting back into the way of actually being able to film live operations and have interaction with people actually in a clinical or a surgical setting.
Yeah. Okay. Just what about looking at the developments that you've seen in immersive technologies in your 5 years? Would you like just to take me on the journey from when you first started and what you were doing, and whether that's any different now? What has technology enabled you to do now that you couldn't do at the start?
Oh, well, David, that's quite a lot. I mean, I've been in sort of immersive technology, really, as I say, that for 15 years. So I've seen a huge sort of impact in that. But it's something that I think we're sort of rushing towards now. I think the sort of impact that we're seeing is that everything that we wanted to do for a long period of time, but it wasn't possible sort of technically to the sort of proficiency that we needed, is now becoming a reality. And whether that's that's in actual fact the quality of what's been able to be done, the quality of the type of headsets that's being used. It's all sort of working up into sort of a perfect sort of storm to actually sort of make virtual reality, especially an immersive technology, a great training tool for the future.
Yeah, so most of the work that you do in medical reality is involved with medical education and training. Can you give me some examples of practical uses and the types of practitioners that are using these technologies?
Yes, David, it's very interesting. We actually started off targeting medical students initially, but now we see that what we do actually makes sense for healthcare professionals, whether those are medical students or surgeons or consultants or nurses or paramedics. And really that's the sort of where we started off, was in actual fact helping to get medical students into the operating theatre to actually sort of see how certain operations were carried out. But now we're working on projects actually to see how people work in wards as well. But also, so it's not just surgery now, we've expanded out from that. And we're also looking at what we call sort of continued professional development, because people really need to keep on learning and need to keep on sort of honing their skills throughout their careers. So that's the one sort of major aspect and change that I've seen for medical realities over the last year or so. And the pandemic sort of highlighted that, because, for instance, medical students especially haven't been allowed into hospitals or been allowed into operating theatres for over a year now. So they're actually missing out sort of huge sort of gaps in their sort of normal education. And immersive technology can actually obviously take you actually back into those environments safely, easily and quickly.
Yeah, I think that's a very valid. I think that's a very valid point. The kind of medical education you're training, I'm guessing now, but from what I've learned from you in the past, you primarily use real video footage and real still images rather than a synthetic environment. Is that the case, and why?
Yes, yes, it is. Actually, we lean very heavily on something that actually occurs, because that enables us, in actual fact, to cover a lot of ground very quickly and very efficiently. For instance, training operations or training sessions occur naturally, and we just actually sort of make use of those because we capture them in 360 with multiple different cameras, and we weave a sort of story, an immersive story, where people can in actual fact feel as though they're actually there attending that training or education sector. Because we feel that even if you sort of transition over to working in simulation, and we do have a little bit of simulation work, but it's all directly related to seeing how to do the operations or the procedures correctly in the first place. So we're all about educating first and training second.
Okay, well, it's coming around time for me to invite Lucia Panesi. I know she's been sitting in the background there with a video off and microphone on, so I've got to ask her to switch them on now so I can bring her into the conversation. But Steve, just finally, are you getting involved or like getting involved into digital therapies at all?
Yes, in a way, because we see that's something which sort of intrigues us, and really it's a little bit of an offshoot to what we do now. So we're looking at that, but it's going to be secondary to what we do right now, because we see that training and education is where there's a big gap and a big need right now.
Thank you very much for joining me this morning, Steve. I'm now going to add Lucia to our. You wonderfully made up, Lucia. You don't normally make up that way.
No, it's a very normal suntan.
Oh, is it very
not-
normal? So,
The only
okay.
makeup I'm wearing is on my eyes. This is normal
Ah.
sun in Italy right now.
Okay. Well, I just want to say thank you to Steve for joining us this morning, and I will see you this afternoon, Steve.
That's my
We'll
pleasure.
talk again.
Great. Thank you,
Okay.
David.
Bye
Bye,
bye.
Steve.
Hi, Lucia. Well, I've already given a little bit of a plug with a sting video of your imaginary rehability product. Would you like to begin by just introducing yourself and telling me something about imaginary?
Yes, thank you. I'm Lucia Pannese. My background is in mathematics. And 17 years ago, I founded a small company in Milano, Italy. The company's name is Imaginary. Since the very beginning, we were working on serious gaming, which was, well, a little bit like fantasy 17 years ago. Nobody knew what they were. Now everybody's talking about gamification. So it was really early stages, and we started with games for training, like the area Steve was talking about just a minute ago. And then we switched very much into everything that has to do with health and care. And since over 8 years, we have been concentrating quite a lot on rehabilitation. So now our product Rehability, which you mentioned before, is our flagship product, and it's a tele-rehabilitation system.
Okay. And tele-rehabilitation, a lot of people won't be familiar with that phrase. Could you just say a little bit more about what tele-rehabilitation is?
Yes, the idea is that since you have to keep patients out of the hospitals, I mean, now more than ever with the pandemic, of course, but even in normal times, we have very many chronic patients. So the number of chronic patients is raising constantly every year, and the number of specialists is staying constant or is going even down sometimes. So there is a huge gap, which is getting worse and worse. In the possibility of treating this kind of patients. And also the kind of rehabilitation service that they get is far too short. And very often they're missing some good opportunities of getting healthier or slowing down some degeneration. So the idea is that you can set up some system, and ours is game-based, where you offer some digital exercises. So ours are in the form of digital games, which are really studied specifically for a certain area of diseases, and normally designed together with this kind of patients, so the patients from the target group, so that you can leave the ownership of the rehabilitation in the hands of specialists. So in other words, specialists are still setting up highly personalized therapy plans for each single patient, and they're monitoring them while the patients are training at home asynchronously. So you don't need this one-to-one relationship all the time of the specialist monitoring the patient constantly, but you can asynchronously allocate some time to the specialist to monitor the plans and in case change the therapy plans, and the patient can train in that time frame of the day where he or she feels most comfortable.
So there's lots of benefits that you've highlighted there. I mean, one of them is productivity. Would you say that rehability allows therapists to be able to manage effectively more patients?
Yes, definitely. Actually, he's the taking care of digital innovation in a huge hospital in Rome, in Italy. And he told me that out of all the patients that they have in the hospital, which are thousands per year in very many disciplines, only 20% of those patients really need this one-to-one relationship. So only 20% of the patients in rehabilitation need to train all the time together with a therapist. This means that 80% of the patients could theoretically train at home if such programs existed and were embedded into daily routine, which means again that yes, something like Rehability can raise productiveness because, of course, if you don't have 1 full hour allocated to the patient, you can take, say, 5 minutes per day to check what the patient is doing and if he or she is still on track. And the other 55 minutes, you can imagine, you can allocate to other patients. So you can dedicate some hours of the day to those patients who really need you, and some others to work along processes that actually have to be established, because then you have to know when you have to talk to these patients, to see them, say every second week you want to see them once, or every week you call them once. So it really depends on the patient how you set up a process, but it definitely can save you a lot of time to work with far more patients that you can do now.
And also, you mentioned the fact that, well, obviously, because it's tele-rehabilitation, there's some remote use involved. What are the likely benefits of people being able to take these rehabilitation exercises in their own home environment?
Well, there's an obvious raise of quality of life, because they specialist rehabilitation centers are not everywhere. So of course, if you don't need to travel, and normally you have to be taken there, so there's a second person involved, which either represents a cost, or somebody, for example, not working because they have to take you to this facility. So it's an enormous reduction in time that you allocate there. Also, you don't need to train at special hours, but you train when you can, or when you feel most comfortable, when you feel it's best. And also because this kind of rehabilitation, the game-based rehabilitation, is being designed with patients, it really works together to raise your motivation to adhere to the therapy. So in other words, you as a patient can see the benefits, you realize why it's good, why you're doing these things. And we have collected some very interesting observations by specialists who tell us that the patient, because of the gameplay, concentrates much more on the game and much less on the pain and on the fatigue that they have. So they don't complain so much, and they even sometimes feel some sort of fun element, although they know perfectly well why they're doing it and why it's good. So they see the benefits of what they're doing.
So I understand you don't have to rush off now. So maybe I could show the rehability demo clip, and then you can talk about that afterwards. So I'm going to play it now.
Okay, thank you.
I think that gives a good idea of how rehabilitation works. And I saw at the end of that video, there's quite a number of different versions of rehabilitation. Would you like to say what these differences are between these different products?
Well, yes. First of all, it's very important that rehabilitation or a system supporting rehabilitation is built really with some very specific studies focusing on specific pathologies. So in other words, I don't believe in a technology that serves very different kinds of patients. We started from neurology, and out of neurology, we choose 4 main pathologies: stroke, MS, Parkinson's, and spinal cord injuries. And we really studied in depth for almost 8 years these 4 pathologies and patient groups. Because if you work on patients' motivation, you have also to understand what kind of patients you're treating, and what their limitations are, what the problems are, how fragile they are, and so on. So Rehability Neuro is in the meantime registered as a medical device. And we have a kids version already there, but it's not registered yet. We have delivered the first prototype of a cardiac version, which is much more aerobic, and you have much more movement, of course, than you have in neurology, clearly. And we are about to start studies with a group in Italy who is interested in rare diseases. So the idea is that bit by bit, we try to cover several areas where you have some huge problems in terms of NHS systems, of costs, and of long lists of patients waiting for treatment, so that you have very specialized treatment for all these kind of patients. Within the same family of pathologies, then, of course, you have, again, personalized training for every patient, because every patient has different impairments. So then you pick exercises from a library, and you can set exercises which are parameter based, so that the same exercise for you and for me could still be different. But still, the kinds of exercises that you pick should belong to different rehabilitation systems. So that's the reason of the various labels that you saw there in the video.
And the process of getting a CE mark to validate it as a medical device, can you just say a little bit about that process and how difficult it is, and what the implications are of rapidly changing technologies?
It's quite a journey to get something certified as a medical device. Although for now, it's still enough to have medical certification class 1, which is in the end an auto certification. So it's the easiest step, because clearly you're not you're delivering a tool in the hands of specialists, and you don't play with vital parameters of patients in a way, if you allow me the term. Still, it's a bit difficult if you want to do it properly. For example, we have 22 scientific publications behind rehability, and still we studied also literature in general to see if there were other studies demonstrating what our claims are and what our publications are saying. So it's quite a huge amount of work, from the clinical studies and the usability. You have to demonstrate that you did proper usability studies, you did trials. Actually, I know you could take it a little bit more on lightweight in a way, but still it's worth doing it seriously, because then in 2 years the normative is changing. So then you have to demonstrate much more, and you have to have experts signing what you're writing. So it makes a lot of sense to give it a good thought already now. In terms of changing the software, you're very tied up afterwards, so there's no changing anything anymore, apart from bugs and things like that, where you have to hold a register to certificate what changes you did. But if you wanted, for example, to add a new pathology, then you should recertify everything. So that's why we waited quite a long time to register Rehability Neuro as a medical device, because we wanted to have really everything in place that we thought was fundamental. And now we sort of closed it, apart from potential bugs, which could maybe happen. And we concentrate on the other lines, and we will certify the cardiac version once it's ready, and the kids version, and so on. It's quite a tough journey.
So, looking at, I've asked everyone this, looking at the effect of coronavirus on your business, has this helped to make people more aware of telemedicine and the fact people can't join together? Has that been a kind of bonus for you?
Well, of course, until some years ago, we were sort of sitting on the moon down there, and medical people were sometimes very curious, interested. They liked the system when they saw the system, but still they saw no way of introducing it into normal practice. Only few wanted it for working in the clinic together with the patients, just as a motivational tool. So that's why we could even wait for the registration as a medical device. Of course, coronavirus changed everything and actually shortened uptake of these kind of technologies drastically, because clearly patients should stay outside of hospitals as much as possible, and everybody sees the usefulness also of working from remote with patients. So everybody has been trying to do tele visits, teleconsultations, tele everything they could. So actually now, yes, a lot of doors have been opened, a lot of heads have been opened as well, I must say, because very often it's a cultural issue. Of course, we are still struggling a little bit for things like reimbursement. So there's the whole topic of digital therapeutics coming up, although that's still a little bit different from telemedicine, I believe. I've been studying the German, I'm half German, so I've been studying the German system allowing digital therapeutics. And there again, to be able to register your tool as a digital therapeutics, first of all, you have any way to be a medical device. So that's the first step for everything in a way. And even for reimbursement now, you should be a medical device or they won't reimburse you. So every country is different. Now the big topic is the topic about reimbursement. As far as I know, Italy is about to, or they are writing the norms and the regulations for things such as telemedicine in terms of televisits, telemonitoring, and telerehabilitation, but cardio and respiratory. So these two are excluded at the moment from what the ministry is writing. And I guess it has to do with the delicacy of the topic. So in other words, if you do cardiac and pulmonary diseases, you have to definitely monitor vital parameters while you are rehabilitating the people. So it's one step more difficult in terms of monitoring of the patient. But for example, neurorehabilitation is included. So we hope that that comes very soon, because many clinics are already installing the system and experimenting telerehabilitation, but they have to use things like studies, so scientific studies or patient support programs to do that. But they want to get organized and to understand how to do it, because they know it's coming really quickly. So in its tragedy, the pandemic has helped us a lot.
Well, they say in English, every cloud has a silver lining. And I want to thank you for joining me this morning, Lucia. I will see you again this afternoon, I hope. And I look forward to speaking to you then. Thank you, Lucia. So I'm going to close now with a little video promotion for Parkinson's Concierge, who are organising an event in April. And so I've created a little video trailer to help promote their very worthwhile activities. Hello, my name is David Wortley. I'm the CEO and founder of the Digimed TV channel, which launches on March the 29th. I'm delighted to be involved in supporting the Parkinson's Concierge. My involvement is in my capacity as the Vice President of the International Society for Digital Medicine. And I try to share best practices in digital medicine, particularly digital therapeutics, of the kind which could be a benefit to people suffering with Parkinson's. So My role is to help share knowledge, information and resources about technologies that can support people with Parkinson's. In this context, I run a series of webinars and interviews and programs across a variety of topics. Many of the digital therapeutics products and services that are available are of benefit to people suffering from Parkinson's. So I hope that I will be able to act as a touch point to connect people with valuable products and services that will support people with this terrible Parkinson's condition. But there are great opportunities and signs of hope for people with Parkinson's, because there are very many digital therapeutic technologies that can be used to support and enhance the lives of people with Parkinson's. I'm collaborating with Parkinson's Concierge, and I hope through my webinars and through the Digimed TV channel, I will be able to support Parkinson's Concierge in raising awareness of Parkinson's. My first event is on Monday, March the 29th, and during this event I hope to be able to promote details of future events and activities that are being organised by Parkinson's Concierge. So thank you very much for taking the time to listen to this video, and I hope you will join me in some of our activities throughout the coming year. Thank you. So it just remains for me to sign off now and thank all of the guests on this morning's TV program, and I hope you found it interesting. This program will be repeated with a different mixture of existing and different guests this afternoon, starting at 3:30 p.m. British Summer Time or UK time, whichever you prefer. So this is me signing off now from the inaugural broadcast of the Digimed TV channel. Thank you for joining me, and I hope that you will join me for future events. Thank you.